Good morning. My name is Jim Callahan, and seated right next to me here is Mary Lynn Bowe from Brandon, who has agreed to assist me in this program today, The Demise of the Common Core. I'll be waiting for some questions from Mary Lynn as soon as she's ready.
I'm ready. Okay, Jim, so about 5 or 6 years ago, most of the states were very anxious to adopt the Common Core standard, the state standards in mathematics. But I've noticed, like through social media and the news, that some of the states are starting to drop off, and there's not very many people that are very happy with this. Can you tell me why? Like, what's wrong with this Common Core standard?
Well, I think the things are that there's most likely more things wrong with it than it could ever possibly have been right. But the biggest problem that I see is different from what I watch and listen that other people see. What I see is that we have a Common Core which has as its directive for what it is that children are supposed to learn what they call a standard. And a standard has a small set of rules, and it's up on the board there now. And in case you can't see it clear enough, I'll read the very first one. It says, what is a standard? It's a clear set of information that would allow a person reading a standard to know exactly what is expected. Wait till you see some of the ones I have for us, and you tell me if you think, after reading it, you would have any idea what's expected. It's also a clear set of directions, but the most important part is that examples of its meaning should accompany the standards for clarification, and almost every single standard in the core does not do that at all. There are no examples. So therefore, the interpretation of the core is one of the problems that we see, that people seem to be jumping all over, and I don't understand why they don't go to the core itself and read it to see it never says any of those things in the core, although the statements that the core says are very vague, but they don't say this. Can we switch to the next one? So here is an actual standard. It says, all the top out is just telling you exactly where it is. It's talking about the fact that it's under numbers and operations and based, and it's coded, and it's on page 29 of the CCS mathematics booklet. And then it talks about fluently add and subtract multi-digit whole numbers using standard algorithm. So first of all, we have the word fluently, which doesn't seem to make an awful lot of sense. I mean, how do you tell whether a child does add and subtract fluently? You need to have some guideline, some type of a rubric that would say what fluently actually does mean. You just can't say that. Then it says multi-digit whole numbers. What are they? Are they 2-digit, 3-digit, 5-digit, 6-digit? And then what is the standard algorithm? Let me show you what some of the interpretations of this are. This just was on the other night on Facebook. And I can't find it again. They took it off, or they just do that to Facebook anyway. But here was the problem. This lady had just come back from a seminar at her school, and she was told that the example was 43 take away 13, which she did in about 12 seconds, and got the answer to be 30. But that's not how she was told that the children were to do it. They were to take the 43 minus 13, put it horizontally. Then they were to write the 13. You can see the 13 starting here. And then I did it in red. I don't know if the red's not coming up, but then the kid was to try to go to a nice number, like maybe like 15. How many would you have to add to 13 to maybe get to 15? And the person in this case was being directed to choose 2, which would now give you 15. Then you were to take the 15 and figure out what kind of a number would you add to it to also make a number that would be kind of nice, which would be 5, so you got to 20. You went to 20, you added 10, you now came to 30, you added 30, you now came to 10, you had 40, you then had 40, you added 3 to get to 43. Now you add up all the numbers that you put there, which on my paper is red, yours didn't come out, this didn't come out red, to get 30. And then she said, this is what the Common Core said. The Common Core never said that. There's no place in the Common Core that says that. This is an interpretation by a company. I don't know which company. She didn't say. She didn't say that it was investigation. She didn't say that it was everyday math. She didn't say it was Bridges. She didn't say it was Math Lab. She didn't say it was Connected. She didn't say any of those things. But she did say that it was from the Common Core. And that's my beef, is that the Common Core itself, the standards, are so horribly written that the interpretation is up to these book companies who don't have a clue anyway, and that's what the schools are buying and making our children try to learn. And when you see the results at the end, you'll see that the learning has been a disaster because the assessment company has no idea what the school book, the book companies have written, and the book companies have no idea what the standards mean because there's no clarity in them whatsoever. Now here's another one. This was a young lady from Kansas. She couldn't understand this one at all. She said, Jack used the number line below to solve the problem 427 minus 316. Find his error, then write a letter to Jack telling him what he did right and what he should do to fix his mistake. So she said, hey, I don't feel bad. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in electronic engineering, which includes extensive study in differential equations and other higher mathematics. Even I cannot explain the Common Core mathematics approach, nor do I get the answer correct. In the real world, simplification is valued over the complication. This is not the Common Core either. I couldn't understand a woman who would do this and go before a school board wouldn't actually have gone into the Common Core booklet itself to see where does it say that in here to go do this thing. It doesn't say it, just like the first one doesn't say it. Here's one locally. We have one of those programs here. It's called Bridges. And locally, this was the thing. Angela wants to buy a scooter. She has $57 for her birthday money and $19 when doing some gardening jobs in the neighborhood. The scooter costs $120. How much more does Angela need? So therefore, she's going to use a number line. And the person who did this actually got it wrong also. But this is what our kids are being asked to do, which is the worst and the most pathetic math you can possibly ever imagine. Yet we have lots of people who are endorsing this from the point of view that they say, the Common Core was nice. I actually endorse every single one of these standards. And you say, really? Have you ever really read them? For example, here's one in the kindergarten. Here's a kindergarten. I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Here's one that's in the book. And look at standards. I want you to take a peek at this. See if you understand when you get to the end, because what you're supposed to do when you get to the end is be able to see what is it that children are supposed to learn because of this standard. Understand a fraction, 1 over b, as the quantity form by 1 part, when a whole is partitioned into b equal parts. Understand a fraction, ab, as the quantity formed by a parts of size 1b. Now you tell me when you're done. You're a third grade teacher. You tell me what that says to you as a third grade teacher. What is it that my children are supposed to learn from this awful, awful standard? And this is exactly as it is. There is nothing else to it. There is no directions. There are no examples. There's nothing. And this is what the whole car is full of. So you can see why it's doomed. It was doomed right from the beginning. Here's another one, a doomer. Explain why a fraction AB is equivalent to a fraction NA divided by NB by using visual fraction models with attention to how the numbers and size of the parts differ, even though the two fractions themselves are the same size. Use this principle to recognize and generate equivalent fractions. At least we know what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to generate equivalent fractions, but how are you supposed to do it? What's going to be the example? If this is the way the standards are written, I wonder how the assessment company figures out what they should ask children to do so that we can find out if kids can do this. Well, we don't have that. What it is, it's publishing companies interpret this, and they put out what they think it means, and that's what the school systems have bought for your child. This is sad. This is sad. We've lost complete and utter control because we have nobody watching the store. School committees don't oversee schools. The number of visits made to classrooms to watch what children are actually learning is like nil. I've been in over 700 schools. I know. Yeah. I've taught 30,000 demonstration lessons in schools and children whose names I don't know. I know what's going on there. I've been there. And I'm sad. I'm really sad. I've been fighting this for so many years, and I seem to be getting absolutely nowhere. But that's, I guess, there are certain things you never give up on. And I'll never give up on people's children. Here is a few standards that you just say to yourself, oh, come on. Here's a kindergarten standard. Count to 100 by ones and by tens. Well, it says count. to 100. Is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 counting? I thought in order to count, you had to have something to count, like maybe an object or two. But no, it's not counting. It's reciting. Reciting to 100. Have you ever listened to children recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? You know, Connie stands on an apple and things like that? No. So then it says count forward beginnings from a given number with the known sequence instead of having to begin with 1. I wonder what that's for. Do you think that's to solve those kind of problems that we just saw where the kids are going to count forward? I was with the principal of one of the schools not too long ago. Sue had 96 marbles. Her sister had 59. What was the difference between one child and the other? And the kids all got it wrong. And so I said, he said, I don't understand it. He said, well, I said, why don't you understand that? He said, well, that's easy. All you have to do is count forward. I said, really? You wouldn't subtract. You'd count forward. And I said, how would you do it? He said, well, you start with 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, and you got it all the way up to 97. He said, the answer's 38. I said, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's not 37. It's not 37, it's 39. Because he started with the wrong number. He started with 59. You're going to start to count forward. You have to start with the next one after the 59, the one called 60. And then it says, write the numbers from 0 to 20, represent numbers of objects with written numerals, with 0 representing a count of no objects. How'd you get them? How'd you get to 20? You had to count them. When you ended up, that's writing down what you counted in numerals. And it's not a number. It's numerals. Here's my love, though. When counting objects, say the number names in the standard order, pairing each object with one and only one number name, and each number name with only one and only object. So if I had 7 objects, which I didn't bring, which I should have, and I counted them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When I said 7, that's the name of that last object. I guess I always thought that 7 meant that all the objects. I guess that's what I thought. I thought that was the reason for counting, was to figure out how many objects do I have, not to give me the name of the last one. That last one was the 7th. It's not 7, it's 7th. And that's why we're killing the math. And these 4 just came from the kindergarten. These are kindergarten standard. I have a pretty good idea that people are actually doing it. Did you have any questions?
Well, it just seems to me that the standard itself has no standards. So why do they even bother? Why do they name it that? I don't get it. But
no, I think we should stop right there. I think that's a perfect statement. Actually, the standards have no standards, and that's our trouble. See, other people are confusing the standards with the interpretation of the implementation by these book publishing companies.
Right.
They're not looking at the standards themselves to see why they're doomed. They're doomed because the people who made them didn't have a clue. Here's a new one.
Right.
Represent addition and subtraction up to 10 objects using. The KOA-1 is the kindergarten operations and algebraic thinking, the first standard. It says to do this, represent the idea. Kids are supposed to have a chance to use objects, makes sense, fingers, mental images, drawings, sounds, acting out situations, and verbal explanations. But this next one is a problem. It says expressions, whatever they are. I've asked, I can't tell you how many kindergarten teachers, if they have any idea what an expression is versus the last one, which is an equation. To date, I have had nobody able to explain the difference between an expression or an equation. So if up the top they used objects, and they used 3 little dogs plus 2 little dogs, would they use an expression? Oh, they use an equation to tell you how many dogs they have. You know what? They use an equation, which is wrong. They should have used an expression. An expression does not use an equal sign or an inequality sign. It just is looking for you to evaluate it, to tell you what happens if you actually did put 3 dogs with 2 dogs. You would get 5 dogs, not equal 5 dogs. To equal 5 dogs, you'd need 10. The 3 plus the 2 on one side, and its balance on the other side, which would have to be 5 dogs. But that doesn't go over big at all either. As a matter of fact, my friend and I, Mrs. Malin Baricchio, wrote a book on this, which is published by Didex, and it tells you how equals really does work, and it also tells you how expressions work. But and the next one here says there's understanding an expression. And you can see it's an expression, the number of calculations to be performed often as part of an equation. It's part of an equation. An equation really is made up of two of them. An expression on the left side, an expression on the right side, and between it is a symbol, and that symbol is to be decided upon by what you find out to be true when, in fact, you actually evaluate both sides. So it says an algebraic expression does not have a sentence. It does not have a verb, which is typically an equal sign. The algebraic statement of the equation does include a sign showing equality or inequality. An equation always has two expressions which are being compared. Listen to it, please. Being compared. If there's nothing to compare it to, you cannot write an equation. You go to any kindergarten, first, second, third grade, and they're all using equations improperly. And they'll continue. I don't think they're ever going to stop. Because the teacher will say when you get all done, I don't get it. I don't get it. And here it says, what's the appropriate use of an equal sign? An equal sign is appropriate used only in situations involving comparison. I didn't write these up. I didn't make these. These are not my definitions. They're mathematics definitions. I just got a new book the other day, Understanding Algebra, and she did a beautiful job. Now, what's happening because of all this? Well, we'll see if Mary Lynn has any more questions for me, and then we'll go on to the last part.
Well, I'm just wondering, how can these kids be tested properly by these testing companies who probably don't even know? I mean, if you've got all these different publishing books that are interpreting this their own way, and they're, you know, the schools are buying these, how can you possibly test them and get?
Well, I think that's, you're absolutely right on, and that's one of the big problems.
You've got different interpretations, and
well, I think number one is that the schools themselves have never read these books anyway.
right.
They've never compared them to the core, because I wouldn't know how they would do it. How could they possibly compare them to standards that say nothing, have no examples? I don't know how they would do it as a school, but they still went and bought the junk. And they bought the junk. And some of the people that bought the junk right here in this area have all long gone. They're all gone. They're no longer, but the people are still using the same junk. And then they had it they used it for the Vermont framework, and it didn't work there. The results were horrible. As a matter of fact, a mathematically proficient child, after being 7 years in an elementary school, going into MUMS, who took the kneecap test, who got 40% of the test correct, was classified as proficient. And it was funny. I flew home the other day on an airplane from Florida with a pilot who was in the same rating. And sad news, when the pilot, he landed this plane, he didn't do a good job on that one. And the wing fell off and a few other things, but they just kept hiring, because everybody's hiring people, aren't they, with 40% proficiency? Yeah, and if you were proficient with distinction, you got 75% of the test correct. I have to think that people at colleges that may graduate in the highest of levels, kids who have worked so hard, they'd love to know that a person now is going to be called in distinction. If you got 75% of what it is you're supposed to learn, you learned. It's sad. It is sad. But I do have the results of the test. Smarter balanced states have dropped tremendously, just like you started off saying. There's only 15 of them left. Okay, Vermont is one. And so I took this off the internet, and so it shows you Vermont getting 52% of the children in the third grade actually acted as they call proficient, meaning they were in level 1 or level 2, which I don't have a clear definition as to how you get into one, as there is what they call cut scores. A child achieves so much, and if you're in a certain barrier or a classification, you're considered to be level 1, which means you're not a bad math student. You're not bad, but that number is really teeny. The next level is level 2, and that is what if I had some data, I could tell you what the cutoff score was for that and the range, but I don't have it. But I do know that 48% are in level 3 and 4, which means I should have stayed home. I mean, I didn't need to go to school at all. I could have been out playing in the yard and had come and do this much. So when we come to grade 4, look at that, in Vermont dropped off a little. Not as much as the other states. The other states, 58 was the tippity. Now it went down to 55, but we dropped 7, they dropped 3. We continue on in grade 5 to only 42% of the kids now being halfway decent, but grade 6 is a Lulu. 37% of the children in grade 6 who took the Common Core test, Smarter Balance, got 37% of those kids fell into the top 2 categories. That's pretty bad. It's the same number than in grade 11. But not including Vermont, look at over the other one. 29% of the kids who were in the grade 11 told us as they're getting ready to graduate from high school, we don't know any math at all. We're basically math illiterate. They must have been math illiterate. And that's what we're saying. Let me just take you, Vermont's all by itself. Here's Vermont's, what I was just indicating, all by itself. Levels 1 and 2, and you can see that this is sad. Why is this sad? Is it our kids are sad? No. Is it our teachers are sad? No. What is sad? It's sad because the people who buy these programs and things don't have any idea what they've bought and how they've doomed our children. And they are the ones responsible. And it's still going on. I know there's a new superintendent here, and I like him a lot myself personally, but I don't know if he's made any changes because I certainly haven't seen him. He did promise me once that I could be a part of whatever conversations they might have on this, but I've never heard from him. But maybe they're doing something, and I hope so. I hope so, because one of my last things I have is this one. This is, this particular thing right here is just telling you, that went back to Michael Hawk, who's the moron who indicated that 7th graders who pass just a little more than 40% of the kneecap assessment is a mathematically proficient. Who hires these pathetic people? That's his link. You can go right to that thing. But my last question is the one that I'm going to show with the last slide. Where are the results of the Smarter Balance assessment for the ACSU district? Do you know where they are? I don't. I got the ones from Vermont. I got the ones from the 15 states. But I don't have the ones for the area here in which we live. So I would like to ask them to please produce those for the population. And I hope parents get so angry that they will finally demand that we know why it is you are using the program that you are. Maybe they can defend it. All I asked for when I did it was not to say get rid of it. I just said, can we discuss it? Can we discuss why you're using that? The other day, a person showed me an activity in that book. It said you want to take on some elastics, and of course, we know that kids will be fooled if you call them geobands. I mean, they sure were one. That was the principal of the school. I had said, no, they're not really elastics. Those are geobands. And they said, well, they look a lot like elastics. They act like elastics. I can fire them like elastics. I bet they might be elastics. And I said, no, it sounds to me about what a duck. If a duck walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it might be a duck. But anyway, the person was asked to put the geoband on a geoboard. Well, if you've ever known what a geoboard is, the geopegs, we make the elastics go around the pegs in a round way. When I was in school, a square actually had 90-degree angles, and they weren't round. Maybe they are today. I mean, they're changing all the words. You don't add anymore. No. The words slip in my mind. You compose. You compose today. And if you subtract, you decompose. I'm now 80 years old. I know I'm getting closer to that last word, and I'm not too anxious to be there. Go ahead.
No. I'm just thinking that if the parents are involved in their children's lives and their children's education, and they should be, even if they're in school, then they should get on these, the people that are supervisors or whatever, and that are responsible for this, and demand that it changes.
Well, I'm trying to do that because I haven't been in all those 600-700 schools. The amount of time that administrators spend in a cafeteria is 10 times the amount of time they spend watching the class. As a matter of fact, I know that there are schools that haven't seen the administrator in their school, in their classroom, for 5 years. So here, there's 180 times 5, 900 days going on, and you have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
And you don't seem to care about what they're doing. Stop making principals go and do stupid things. School committees are very notorious for this. They have you going off doing fetch and petch and all kinds of junk, except spending your time watching what's going on in an educational manner for the children that are their responsibility. Schools only exist for children. There's no other reason for having
That's
one.
right.
No kids, no school. When I was here as principal, we had 850 children in our school. Today, they're close to 400. Why? There's 75,000 schools have opened up. There's all kinds of private schools. Many people are electing to homeschool their kid. And I think after looking at these results, I think the homeschool has got something. I think they got a secret. You better start educating your own kid, because we're not.
That's right. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. That is end.